There are moments when the world grows quiet, not because the noise has stopped, but because something within you refuses to be drowned out any longer. It starts subtly. A tightening in the chest, a hesitation before saying yes, a glance in the mirror that lingers a little too long. That pause is not confusion, it's recognition. A faint realization that the life you've built may not have been built for you. You begin to notice how often your choices are shaped by avoidance. Avoiding conflict, avoiding judgment, avoiding disappointment. And yet, what you truly avoid is yourself. The self that has needs you've silenced. The self that questions what you've accepted without thought. The self that knows when you are off course, even if no one else can see it. Carl Jung taught that the soul does not vanish when ignored. It waits in discomfort, in fatigue, in the inexplicable sense that something's missing. The discomfort is not the problem. The refusal to confront it is. Choosing yourself is not a moment of defiance. It's the return to an honesty you've postponed. It is not loud and it does not demand applause. It simply asks, are you finally ready to live in alignment with who you truly are? 1. The world that teaches you to forget. We are not born into clarity. From the first breath, the world begins its work. It wraps us in expectations before we even know our own names. The roles we are handed, son, daughter, student, achiever, become cages masquerading as identities. And the longer we play along, the harder it becomes to hear anything else. There is no malicious intent in this. The world does not conspire to destroy your truth. It simply favors patterns over depth, PR, predictability over complexity. You are taught to succeed by becoming legible to others, not by becoming real to yourself. But Jung reminded us, anything that forces you to abandon your inner compass, no matter how noble it appears, will ultimately make you a stranger to your own life. When you wake up each morning and slip into roles like a costume, there is often a moment, fleeting but piercing, when you feel the disconnect. You go through the motions, say what's expected, smile on cue, but inside there's an ache, not loud, not violent, just persistent, a hum beneath the surface that says, this isn't it. You may not remember when the forgetting began. Maybe it was the first time you were told to be realistic or don't be so sensitive. Maybe it was when someone laughed at your dream and you laughed along to survive. These small compromises form a mosaic of quiet self-abandonment, and over time that mosaic becomes your mirror. The tragedy isn't just that you forget who you are. It's that you begin to believe you were never anything more than the roles you play. That's the theft. And it's subtle. It never announces itself. It just happens. One small silence at a time. Yet within that silence there remains a sliver of recognition. A knowing that refuses to vanish. It shows up when you least expect it, while listening to music alone in your car or catching your reflection in the window late at night. A version of you that doesn't need validation, that doesn't perform, that simply is. To choose yourself in a world that profits off your forgetfulness is an act of quiet revolution. But it begins not with rebellion, but remembrance. Not loud declarations, but still awareness. You don't have to dismantle your life overnight. The first step may be as small as telling the truth to yourself in private. It may be recognizing the lie in your smile, or choosing not to answer a message that only pulls you further from your center. Boss, before anything else, you must see the forgetting for what it is. Not your fault, but no longer your future. And from that realization, everything else becomes possible. 2. Listening to the voice beneath the noise. Most people don't notice when their inner voice begins to dim. It happens so gradually, buried beneath errands, meetings, obligations, that the silence becomes normal. What once felt like a compass becomes background static, but still it doesn't disappear. It waits beneath the noise, speaking in sensations instead of words. The body remembers. Long before the mind catches up, Your shoulders tighten, your breath shortens, your gut clench. These are not random reactions. They are the language of intuition, speaking in a dialect we've been taught to ignore. And each time you dismiss that whisper with logic, you create a little more distance from yourself. Jung didn't romanticize intuition as magic. He saw it as the unconscious mind reaching for your attention. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it simply offers a message. And if you've built a life where there's no room to receive it, you'll mistake anxiety for mist, airy and unease for failure. The hardest part isn't hearing the inner voice, it's trusting it when it asks you to step away from what's familiar. It won't always make sense on paper. It might ask you to pause when everything around you says hurry. It might tell you to walk away from something everyone else envies. But that tension, that discomfort, that's the point. We think clarity is comfort, but in truth, clarity often feels like risk. The voice within will not offer you safety in the conventional sense. It offers alignment, and alignment sometimes costs convenience, approval, or ease. What it returns is not immediate reward, but relief. Not applause, but peace. Every moment you choose not to override that voice is a small act of wholeness. Not every instinct is perfect, of course. Intuition must be honored and refined, not idolized. But ignoring it entirely turns life into an endless negotiation with your own knowing. When something in your life feels wrong but isn't easily explained, you don't need a clearer answer. You need deeper listening. Stop asking what others would do. Begin asking what you already sense. The truth isn't hidden from you. It's been with you the entire time, waiting for your permission to be believed. You don't need to shout your truth to prove it's real. Whisper it to yourself until it becomes louder than your fear, until it becomes something you no longer question but embody. Because in the end, the voice you choose to trust will shape the life you choose to live. And if that voice does not belong to you, neither will the life. 3. Shadows are not enemies. There is a quiet discomfort that follows you, even on your best days. It trails behind your successes, creeps into your solitude, and surfaces when you least expect it. You might mistake it for self-doubt or moodiness, but Jung called it something else: the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not dangerous. It is simply everything you've pushed out of view. It is the grief you never expressed, the rage you were taught to hide, the desires you labeled as selfish. And every time you pretended it wasn't there, it watched, waiting for the day you'd finally turn around. Most of us are taught to fix ourselves by removing what's dark. We focus on the light, force positivity, and try to convince ourselves that healing is just the absence of discomfort. But Jung warned us, integration, not elimination, is the path to wholeness. You cannot become fully yourself by amputating pieces of your experience. What you deny becomes what controls you. The unspoken becomes the undertow. Eventually, your shadow seeps through, perhaps in a tone you didn't mean to use or a choice you didn't realize you were making. It doesn't have to be this way. You can learn to approach what you've avoided, with curiosity instead of judgment, with gentleness instead of shame. Sit with what unsettles you. Ask it what it wants you to see. Let it speak, even if its voice shakes. You may not like what you find. You're not meant to, but you're meant to witness it. And in doing so, something miraculous occurs. The parts of you that once caused sabotage become allies. The reactions that once ruled your life begin to lose their grip. Wholeness is not the absence of conflict. It is the acceptance of contradiction. You are allowed to be joyful and grieving, angry and kind, afraid and brave. There is no version of you that needs to be perfect in order to be worthy. To choose yourself is to choose even the parts you wish you weren't. Because only when all of you is welcomed can any of you feel safe enough to lead. 4. The quiet power of saying no boundaries are often misunderstood as resistance, but they are not walls to keep people out. They are thresholds that define where self-respect begins. You were likely never taught this. Instead, you were rewarded for compliance. You earned affection by being agreeable, not honest. And so you learned to shape your truth to fit the expectations of others, even when it splintered something inside you. Saying no doesn't come naturally when you've spent years surviving through accommodation, but every yes that betrays your well-being is a silent injury. The discomfort of speaking your limits is temporary. The cost of never doing so is permanent. Jung understood this deeply. To choose the self is to protect its boundaries, and protection doesn't mean aggression. It means being clear, calm, grounded. It means refusing to leak energy into spaces where your truth is unwelcome. You will be tempted to justify your no, to explain it away, soften it for the comfort of others. But the moment you begin defending your needs, you invite others to debate them. And your life is not a courtroom. The power of a boundary is not in how loudly you assert it, but in how quietly you honor it. It's not always about cutting people off. Sometimes it's about creating enough space between you and them so you can hear yourself again. Sometimes it's not a line drawn in anger, but a door that closes softly, because your peace is worth the quiet. Each time you say no when everything inside you screams to default back to old patterns, you are rewiring the very story you've been telling about who you're allowed to be. And slowly, what once felt like confrontation begins to feel like self-trust. No is not rejection. It is direction. It tells the world where your energy goes and what your values are. It creates the space for your yes to matter. Without it, you scatter yourself across too many places where you don't belong. When you begin practicing this, expect resistance, not just from others, but from within. Guilt will rise, especially if your identity was built on being liked. But guilt isn't always a moral signal. Sometimes it's a symptom of growth. Say no with presence. Say it without apology. And watch how your life begins to reflect the clarity that your boundaries protect. 5. What you lose when you don't choose yourself. There are costs we don't count because they don't leave marks. They don't bleed. They don't bruise, but they hollow. Each time you override your intuition, you don't just lose a moment. You lose a thread of self-trust. When repeated, this becomes not an error, but a lifestyle. You begin waking up inside a life that looks like yours but doesn't feel like home. The world praises sacrifice, especially when it's invisible. You're taught to, give until it hurts, and then call that nobility. But Jung warned us there is no virtue in giving what you do not possess. When you are empty, everything becomes heavier. Relationships become burdens. Decisions become indecipherable. And the joy that once felt natural becomes another task to perform. To choose yourself is not about abandonment of others. It is about refusing to abandon yourself first. It is about seeing that people-pleasing is not kindness. It is self-erasure in slow motion. You do not have to wait for a breakdown to reevaluate. You do not need a crisis to justify reclaiming your energy. The absence of chaos is not the presence of fulfillment. There's a grief in realizing how much of your life was lived on autopilot. Let yourself feel it. It's not regret. It's awakening. It means you are ready to write a new story. A life that honors your needs doesn't just feel different. It is different. It changes your pace, your posture, even the way you breathe. Because when you stop betraying yourself, the tension you thought was normal begins to dissolve, and in its place grows something quieter but far more steady: clarity. There are subtler losses too: the dulling of enthusiasm, the loss of spontaneity, the flattening of desire. You begin to forget what you love, not because it left, but because you stopped listening. Passion doesn't always vanish. Sometimes it gets buried under obligation. Choosing yourself can feel radical in a world that rewards self-neglect. But it's not rebellion, it's repair. You are not selfish for taking your energy seriously. You are sustainable, and that sustainability becomes the foundation for everything else you build. 6. The unshakable clarity of alignment. There's a point when everything around you can look fine, yet something inside refuses to settle. Not because you are ungrateful, but because you know. You know the difference between achievement and alignment. Jung understood that real fulfillment does not come from things fitting together perfectly. It comes from them fitting you. Alignment isn't a destination, it's a state of inner coherence, where your words match your values, where your CIS reflect your truth, where you stop adjusting your authenticity to make others comfortable. The more aligned you become, the less interested you are in convincing. You no longer negotiate your worth. You no longer chase what doesn't call you. And that shift doesn't make life easier, it makes it real. Clarity is not found in certainty, it's found in resonance. When something is right, your whole being responds. Not with excitement, but with recognition. A quiet, grounded yes that requires no external approval. From this place, your actions gain weight, your presence holds power, and your relationships become mirrors of your inner state. The world responds not to how hard you try, but to how deeply you live your truth. This clarity might cost you comfort. It might lead you to leave things that once felt essential. But what you gain in return is something that cannot be faked. Integrity. Integrity is not about perfection. It's about inner agreement. And when your Ivy begins to reflect that, peace is no longer something you chase. It's something you carry. Sometimes alignment means letting go of what worked in a previous chapter of your life. What served you once may not serve you now, and that's not failure, it's evolution. Just as a river must shift with the landscape, so too must you. Even your dreams may change. The goals you once chased with urgency might now feel hollow. That's not confusion, that's growth asking better questions. What nourishes you now? What feels alive now? Living in alignment means making room for new answers. It means allowing old definitions to expire and trusting that what emerges will be truer, deeper, and more sustaining than what you've left behind. It may look like simplicity, but it requires great courage. It may not be visible to others, but its effects ripple through every choice, every relationship, every breath. Because when the self is no longer in conflict, the world around you begins to quiet as well. 7. You become the mirror for others. Authenticity is contagious. When you stop hiding, others feel it. When you speak honestly, others listen differently. Not everyone will like it, but the ones who are meant to stay closer. Jung believed that individual transformation creates collective ripple. You don't change the world by demanding others follow your lead. You change it by walking your path with such quiet certainty that others begin to wonder what truth might feel like. When you choose yourself, you become a mirror, not of perfection, but of possibility. You model a way of living that is anchored, not in roles, not in obligations, but in truth. And that truth becomes a sanctuary for you and for those who never knew such a thing existed. Not everyone is ready to walk beside you, and that's okay, because the journey of choosing yourself is not about isolation. It's about resonance. It's about discovering that the more you become yourself, the more the right people recognize you, not because you shouted, but because you stopped whispering. And as you embody this truth, you begin to notice your presence alone begins to shift rooms, not through force, but through frequency. You hold a different rhythm, a steadiness, a rootedness. This is the gift of self-return. You no longer need to convince, chase, or explain. You simply live, and in doing so, remind others that they can too. But your influence is not always visible. Sometimes it arrives as a pause in someone else's day, a soft question. Could I live like that? It might show up in a choice they make quietly, long after you've gone. This is legacy, not as achievement, but as energy passed hand to hand. When you live as yourself, you give others permission to return to theirs. No sermon needed, just presence. That's the paradox of deep change. It begins alone, but never stays that way. The more you align with yourself, the more others begin to remember what alignment feels like. They may not say it aloud, but they feel it. And the world, slowly, subtly, shifts with you. It's easy to dismiss the subtle signs, the unease after a conversation, the emptiness behind an achievement, the weight of a smile that doesn't feel yours. But over time, these signals accumulate, and what once felt like passing discomfort begins to feel like a permanent ache. That ache is not weakness, it's clarity. To choose yourself is not an act of ego, it's a return to balance. You stop giving from depletion. You stop agreeing out of fear, and in doing so, you create a space where what's real can finally grow. You won't always feel certain. Some days choosing yourself will feel like a risk. It will cost you things you once thought were essential: titles, roles, approval. But what you gain is something quieter, yet infinitely more stable. A steadiness in your chest, a stillness in your choices, a life that does not exhaust you to maintain. Jung never promised that the inner path would be easy. He only promised it would be true, and truth does not need to be allowed to be life-changing. Sometimes it's found in the smallest decision, the choice to stop pretending, the decision to pause before pleasing, the courage to keep going even when no one else understands why. You do not owe the world a version of yourself that keeps you fragmented. What you owe, perhaps the only thing you truly owe, is to live without betraying the one person who has always been there, quietly waiting through every version and every disguise. You.